Got two shirts.
Okay.
Good, I'm covered.
Good morning, everyone. It's August 16th at 8:45, and I'm going to call the land bank meeting to order. So we'll convene, and we will open up with the general public comment period. I see we have a couple of people in the audience online. Any comments? Okay, apparently not. So we'll move on to the approval of our last minute meeting minutes from the July 19th meeting. Any comments on the minutes?
I always look at Tim because Tim.
Okay, Jim.
I had one, but it was just a typo.
Okay, yeah, we can settle that offline. Anyone else comments on the meeting minutes? And I have none, so we are moving right along. Okay, partner update from Vicki Edwards, and I see Vicki coming into focus.
Good morning, all. Sorry, look like I'm a little blurry there. Just a couple of quick updates for you all regarding North Shore and then the Beaverton Marsh Red-tailed Trail opening. Regarding North Shore, the draft conservation easement is in Lincoln's hands now. We're really excited to have that moving forward. We plan to take the project to our board in December for final approval. And that sets us up to close in early 2025 during that first quarter. And our our agreement with the Recreation and Conservation Office expires on June 30th of next year. So that really sets us up, I think, to have a little wiggle room in case anything comes up, to be able to close that project and finalize all of the funding and other requirements associated with RCO. And then I also wanted to share that San Juan Preservation staff submitted expenses from the land bank for some of the work at the preserve to RCO, those sort of things that were covered, the demolition and signage. And so we submitted those for reimbursement, and those funds then went to the Preservation Trust, and then we reimbursed the land bank. And so that totals approximately $100,000 that the land bank has received in reimbursements. And then the San Juan Preservation Trust takes care of the administrative aspects of getting the money, having it come to the trust, and then back out to the land bank. So just another example as to how our partnership, I think, is unique in being able to bring all our resources together to complete these complex projects. And then lastly, just want to mention Beaverton Marsh Red-tailed Trail opening. Kudos to Tanya on organizing and having such a great event. We had 5 staff members attend and 3 board members. And I don't want to go into the details, but just appreciate that that's another great way to celebrate a partnership, and a partnership not only with us, but others as well in the community and donors, and being able to achieve really amazing conservation and public access. And so kudos to you all and the stewardship team at the land bank, Doug, Shauna, as well as Jacob and all the volunteers. It really is a fantastic trail and access point. So many thanks to you all. And that's it for us, Brian.
Great, thank you very much, Vicki, and thank you and the trust for all you do in our partnership. It's great. A lot of good
Thank you,
news.
Brian. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, we are up to a council update with Councilmember Many. Who's not on camera.
Here I am. I typically have a prepared, update of fun facts. But the fun fact today is I've been at the fair for the last 3 days in total, and I did not prepare a report. But the one thing I do have to update on is an agenda item, so we'll talk about it when it's an agenda item. I do have to leave early because of the fair. So I'll be leaving at about 10:15. And I hope to see you there. I've seen Marilyn there already like 20 times. That's it.
All right, thank you, Christine. We are moving along. Okay, Chair and Commissioners reports. Come on, you're not gonna say no to yes.
Well, I attended the opening of the Red Tail Trail. And it was fantastic. I walked the trail twice. I thought the people were incredibly enthusiastic, especially people that I spoke to there and elsewhere who live somewhat adjacent to the park and were able to walk over from their homes and were so delighted to have that opportunity. There was really a lot of good feeling from the neighborhood about that particular model of wilderness trail. So thank you very much for that. And other than that, I've been doing fair stuff.
Great.
I attended the Lopez Underground, the music festival on Lopez with Peggy.
That was
Just about a
for the other effort.
Oh, sorry. I can't talk about that. It all runs together. I did attend the Climate Change and Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting. They are working on getting their comprehensive plan amendments through, and it's coming together. They are initiating phase 2 at the fair this week, so they'll be in the same village as the Conservation Land Bank, and we can learn more about it there. And it sounds like it's really happening. So there's a draft of their the areas that they wish to work on out there. So it is coming together. That, and I helped Amanda move a pump for pumping out a well at Guamau. That was fun.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Anybody else? Mike, was that a hand? Okay. Anybody? Well, I guess I have a couple of minor things. I attended the Preservation Trust Summer Social at the North Shore with Anne Marie was there and Marilyn was there. Sandy Creel was there, and Lincoln spoke at it, and it was a nice event. Very, very sunny and warm.
Tanya was there too.
Tanya was there too, I'm sorry.
And Peter was there.
Peter was there,
Dave
of
was
course.
there.
Of course.
there.
We were all there.
Peter conducted tours. Yeah, it was a big event, so that was nice. Another recognition of the Land Bank and Preservation Trust partnership going well.
And can I just say that the place, I haven't seen the site since all the work was done, and I was blown away at how much has happened. So
Yeah.
thank you, Peter and team. It was great. Great to see all that.
Peter might want to add that all the work wasn't done. Lots of work has been done since then. Okay, I also attended a little social gathering with on Orcas with the Friends of the San Juans, which was nice, and they are doing a lot of really good, particularly marine work, eelgrass stuff, and seem to be going in a good direction. But what I wanted to say is that they have endorsed the Land Bank's route, which is nice.
They have a letter in the Sounder supporting us. The Friends of the San
Oh,
Juans.
good, I hadn't seen that, yeah,
Yeah.
since I don't read the sound. Yeah, good. And finally, I'll announce for Marilyn that she has stepped back off of the Communications Committee, and Amy has agreed to take her place, and evidently had a very good first meeting with the committee. And they can report on that further if they want. So I guess that's it for commissioners' reports. Okay, outreach and communications report. Good, Tony, you can do this while you're here.
Oh my goodness. It's just fair, fair, fair. So we are in the Green Village, which has environmental stewardship, which is where you'll find Angela, who's running phase 2 for the climate sustainability in the comp plan. The fair looks great. I mean, things are moved around and I don't necessarily like change, but I found everything, so that's good. Trying to think back, last night we had our second nature prescription walk at Mount Grant Preserve with Dr. Mandy Gula. She's a naturopath on the island. And it was fantastic. Erin was there and some people have told me that bird watching can be very slow. You might make it 10 feet in an hour. That's kind of what botanical medicine walks are like. Every plant has a medicinal value. It was incredible. The doctor is full of so much knowledge, and she had such a good time. She would love to repeat it. So I think we'll be seeing more of her. Lincoln is speaking. Today is Friday. Tomorrow. In the Green Village during the speaker series on climate resiliency and the land bank. Eliza is speaking on Sunday to her new How to Grow Wildflowers guide that came out, and I have that at the booth to hand out as well. I'm trying to remember what we talked about in the communication subcommittee group. We talked about
The library.
the library. I was gonna say community conversation, the library and community conversation. So we will host community conversations. I think we decided October
Oh, yeah.
in the fall, more to be revealed. We'll talk more about that, but to keep that on the radar. And most likely, I think a Zoom like we've done before, just so much is happening, one county Zoom. And then the land bank on San Juan Island, we have the San Juan Island Library display case for the month of September. So I'll work on a display after the fair.
Great.
Maybe I can use some of the things from the fair. I don't know.
Might as well.
And it's been, I think, years. I think I did it the second year I was here. So maybe 2015, 2016 is the last time we've been in there. So yeah, so it's a great opportunity to share what we're doing with the public because it's right in the entrance. So I think that's everything off the top of my head. Lots of upcoming events. Today at Zylstra, there's the alchemy free painting sessions. The poetry workshops have finished, and I'm talking with the Makers Guild, San Juan Islands Makers Guild, about similar events on Orcas and Lopez. But we haven't connected yet because it's Fair Week.
It's very.
It's like saying you have a cat in your lap, it's Fair Week. I can't help you. And that's it, unless there's more from committee members. And thank you, Amy, for taking Marilyn's place.
I was happy to, and Marilyn says she only wants to give it up until after the election, and we might have to have a conversation about that, Marilyn. It's a lot of fun.
We can arm wrestle over that. That'd be fun.
Maybe it can be alternates. No, go ahead.
One other thing about the fair, that might be helpful for Tanya is I forgot to announce that I got a second place ribbon on the photograph that I entered in the fair, which was a montage of my puppy visiting 4 of the land bank site preserves. And it was labeled Travels with Farley Land Bank Preserves. So I got a second on it. I think that's worth $2.
I saw that somewhere. Was it on the website?
I believe it's been posted to some website.
Yeah.
It's on Facebook. I shared
Yeah.
it this morning.
Okay, you're famous.
That's Farley's
Famous
favorite.
for some things. More ways than one.
Better than being infamous.
It's
Okay.
true.
Communications committee, anything else? Anything you'd like to add? I'm not hearing anything. Well, we do have one additional thing on the agenda, which is, I had asked at the last meeting to take a second look at the communications plan. And Tanya, you've been busy. If you're not prepared to talk about that this morning, that's fine. We will hold it over for another meeting, put it on the agenda next time. I did learn something this morning on the boat ride over. Anne Marie enlightened me that the communications plan was actually a county communications plan, not a land bank communications plan, which I didn't realize at all at the time. So that,
So think of it as a subset of we're a subset of the
Mhm.
county.
yeah,
And that doesn't mean that we're not doing our plan.
Yeah.
It just means they've got these other things that they are fitting us into.
Yeah,
because I looked at the 6 pages of that plan and I said, whoa, that's way too big for us.
But it's actually
Um,
what we're doing.
Well, that's great. I don't think we're doing all of those things, and what I'm trying to sort out is what is the land bank's part of all of that stuff, because I know we're not doing it all. And that's what I'd like to hear about, at the next meeting.
So I interpret that to be priorities,
Yes, exactly.
immediate and secondary. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I guess that's it for outreach and communications. Aaron, you want to give us an update on the REIT and finances, and you gave us a little memo.
Yeah, so this is what was kind of asked to be prepared for discussion, however in-depth you wanted to go today, so you guys have seen the breakdown of the work done. So in essence, we conducted an exercise to try and cut 20% of the budget, and most of that spending is stewardship spending. As we sit at the end of July at 45% of budgeted REIT revenue, which is 1.71 million of 3.75 million for the year. That's 45% of the budget after completing the 7th month. So when we have less than half the year to make up more than half of the budget, we figured this was the right time to take a look at our spending. Because the idea is to keep ending cash where it was intended to be when we budgeted. That's the main goal here. And the only way to do that is by looking at projects that we could potentially defer to another year, not just 2025, but beyond also. And then taking a look at some of our completed projects and getting actuals of where we budgeted them to compare to what the actual expenditure was. So with this exercise, looking at our worksheet that all of the staff works off of when they're planning in the biennium, planning for the biennium budget process, they take a look at all their potential projects. Here's what they're going to cost. We use that same worksheet to work off of and say, hey, what can we potentially move to cut 20%? Well, at the end of that process, we were able to look at possibly adjusting and removing about 24% of our stewardship expenses. So the wiggle room is there. It's been created. So at this point, we've done that work. We know what potential projects we save money on, what projects we could possibly defer. At this point, we're just balancing that out with REIT revenue. Depending on what comes in, we could potentially, if we have a couple outstanding months, some projects we might not be aware of, or not projects, some sales go through that we weren't quite aware of, and we have some big numbers, we have the flexibility to spend because we're on top of our project monitoring. So it's not one of those things we want to be super specific about, we're cutting this, cutting that, because we just don't know. We have to just be fluid. All we can really sit here and say is we've done the exercise. We know what projects we can remove and defer. And we have a firm grasp of that where we should be able to maintain ending cash where we expected it to be. I open it up to you guys for any questions.
Okay, questions, discussion from the commission?
no, I just really appreciate it. It represents responsible fiscal management, and I think that's where we want to be. So I appreciate the attention to detail, and the effort that went into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions, and I apologize, Aaron, I tried to reach you yesterday to to ask. So the way I'm understanding this is since it's a reduction, doesn't require a budget amendment.
Right.
We're just, it's just a budget plan
Yep.
for staff for the rest of the year. And I think you were saying that staff work is out together. It's a staff consensus in terms of what could be put off. Okay.
Yes, we're each steward has a worksheet for their specific district and projects, and we worked through that together.
So everybody was involved.
So everybody was involved. And yeah, in terms of the budget, and I didn't mention that just for clarity, with the budgeting process, unless we're adding additional expenses, there is no need for a budget amendment.
Yeah.
So the idea is just to stay within budget, and that's really pertains to bottom line budgeting, where we keep that ending cash where we expect it to be.
I'm curious, why was the decision made though, not to dip into cash reserves?
I think the first step was to see if we had the ability to do it without dipping into reserves. If we didn't have any alternative, if this was too far into the season where we conducted this exercise, we'd probably have to.
Okay.
But I think being fiscally responsible is, trying to make those adjustments without having to do that. And we were able to, so the idea was, yeah, maybe let's see if we can cut 20%. We were able to.
And is the consensus that we're not sacrificing any work that really needs to be done imminently?
Yeah, work is still getting done, and there's still going to be things that pop up that we can't even account for, things that weren't budgeted.
Yeah.
This stuff happens, things that need to get taken care of will get taken care of. We are fortunate to have cash reserves. And it's really hard to say what's gonna happen in the next 4 months, but if we need to dip into it, we do. But every decision of substantial spending, goes through Lincoln authorization. There's all the stewards are very aware of the situation and very responsible and communicative of events arising that weren't planned for, and discussing it and letting me know about
So
it.
this is just deferred. If this
Right.
happens, this is how we're going to
Yeah.
defer it.
Yeah,
In my view, we have no assurance that the reauthorization is gonna pass, and if it doesn't, we are going to need to rethink how we use our entire
Yeah.
fiscal picture, so I think it's time now.
Good point.
Certainly to
Yeah.
throttle that.
Thank you. Doug, you had something?
Yeah, definitely we scaled back with this in mind, but I also just did want to mention that there were projects last year that we were not able to get done from some capacity things, from permitting things that were stuck in purgatory, and those getting carried forward pushed a lot of things off the plate this year, along with the 32-hour work. There's a lot of things that are built in there that we just didn't have capacity to do anymore and already kind of had taken off the plate. So,
I know that you all always have a lot more that you want to do than you probably can get done. So, yeah. Anybody else? Peggy?
So I totally agree that it's a great idea not to dip into the extra funds. Can we see more of a breakout about how this is broken out by district, or is that? I don't need to see it now, but.
yeah,
maybe see it-
I'll share it with you all. It's
I see
really,
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got
You
that.
want
but
more,
I'm wondering in terms of
yeah.
project.
I have much more of a breakdown, and I could definitely send that to you. It's kind of messy and convoluted, and none of it is like, hey, we don't want to necessarily get the picture out that we're cutting all
Right.
of this stuff. So it's a messy, big document, but I'm more than happy to share it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Maryland's got right here.
Well, I have District 1 right here.
Yeah,
So-
that's just,
but
Yeah, it's big.
It's very helpful to me, and I wouldn't mind seeing all three if you are sending them out.
it was in the spreadsheet,
Oh, I just
each
didn't get-
taskbar
Thank you.
is a district.
I didn't
Yeah.
get the other two.
I'd be happy to sit down with anybody and really use that. Stuff from San Juan.
Yeah, I'll make sure I get the nuts and bolts out.
Good.
To you guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments from staff? Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, of course.
Good work. Okay, director's report.
All right, so a few things I wanted to go over today. One is an update on the ballot process for the reauthorization. There were a number of steps that needed to be carried out. They've all been carried out at this point, but the first was for the council to resolve to put the item on the ballot, and then a cover sheet needed to go to the elections office. That happened. The ballot title, which was in draft form in the resolution, has now been finalized, and the ballot title, just in case you're wondering, is a brief description, basically, and then the question itself. There are three parts to it. That's completed. An advertisement went out in the form of a press release. I actually put up some flyers also for pro and con committees, for people to sign up to basically be on an advocacy committee to either advocate for or against the measure. Those committees both were formed. There is both a pro and a con committee. And then on the 13th, there was a deadline for the explanatory statement, which is a neutral statement, basically, which would be in the voters pamphlet, to be completed. That was done. And also the pro and con statements needed to be completed and submitted. I know the pro statement was completed and submitted. I don't know about the con, but I think we can assume there will be one. So that process is done. We're ready to go to November.
And we're Prop 1, so does that mean we're the first one on? And are we just in the San Juan part? Or are we Prop 1 for the whole document?
Well, I don't know exactly what the
Okay.
ballot's gonna look like.
Okay,
There are a number of state initiatives. There'll
That's
be a
my
lot of things on the ballot, but when you get into the San Juan section, it'll be Prop 1. I think there's Prop 2 about the San Juan fire district. I think
Okay.
that's Prop 2, but
okay, gotcha.
hopefully it won't be too confusing for people. I imagine it'll be a big voters pamphlet.
Amy has her hand up. I think she has a question.
Yeah, hey Lincoln. So my question is, given the recent, not so recent, spate of misinformation that's been put out there, I wanted to ask you and maybe the deputy prosecuting attorney who I see sitting there, what is the kind of process, to the extent there is one, for fact checking the con statement? Do we have any sense of that? Thanks.
So my understanding is that the statements are checked, not necessarily for factual accuracy, but they're checked for things like slanderous comments. And they will not be accepted if there are obvious statements along those lines made. John, I don't know if you've got more to fill in on that.
If I understand your question, or I understand your question to be, when the pro and con statements are submitted to elections, which is to the county auditor, is there a fact checking that happens at that stage? And the answer to that is no, there's not a fact checking, but there is a review for slander and I think hate speech and things like that, just as Mr. Borman described. So in terms of what goes on the voter information guide, that's kind of it.
So just a follow-up question there. So you're saying that the prosecuting attorney's office doesn't look at the statements, the pro and con statements for accuracy?
That's exactly right. Those are developed by citizens and submitted, and they say what the citizens want them to say.
And are they required to be signed by those citizens? Or can they just be by a group?
Well, for the county, for things that are, countywide as opposed to statewide, yeah, that's right. There are, for the county initiatives, there are committees appointed of up to 3 people. And so the committee members are the ones who submit the thing and are responsible for the statements.
And their
So
names
Their
are
names
on.
are on.
Their names are on it, okay,
Right, so the advocacy statement is
right,
from Renew Our Land Bank.
right, I know that.
Yeah.
I want to know about the con statement.
Right, I think we heard, it was Mike and
Ron, wait,
Ron.
Ron.
That's correct.
So fact checking is basically up to us and our supporters.
Well,
To respond as not on the
Right.
ballot information.
Right.
Pamphlet,
That'd be-
but-
let
I
it
don't
to be
recall.
accurate.
Yeah,
If I may, Chair, I don't recall when the voter guides are printed, but I assume that if you reached out to the elections office and asked for a copy of the con statement, you could get a copy earlier if you wished.
That would be great,
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. This may seem like a silly question, but it's not. Is the title land bank on the proposition title and then
Yes.
the explanation?
Yes.
It's not in the title,
It's not
but it
in the
is in the
title.
statement. You wanna read it?
It's in the,
I can't read that.
You can't.
I don't read it now.
Okay.
so as I said, the ballot title has those 3 parts and land bank is in there. And it's also in the explanatory
Okay,
statement.
so it's clear to what they're voting for, what the rules were. Okay.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
All right, other
Okay.
questions about that? Good.
I wanna say, I appreciated the improvement from the earlier version that we saw, which was no mention of the land bank.
Oh, good, yeah,
Yeah,
well,
so this is good.
that was my
Better.
concern, I haven't seen the comparison.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't seen the new one. Yeah. I will.
Yeah, I
read it
can,
later.
I can forward you the ballot title and the explanatory statement.
I appreciate that, thanks.
Okay, next up, an update on the grants for the Watmow Head acquisition. As you all know, we have 2 pending grants, one for salmon recovery and one for the aquatic lands enhancement account. We've been kind of going through this process of a complicated appraisal situation where what we're trying to do is retain the historic house, not as a residence, but as a utility structure. And eliminate all the residential potential for that entire property. So we've come up with a hopeful solution, which will involve a boundary line modification, because there is a utility parcel and the main parcel now. And we're looking at doing a modification to just fit all of these ancillary structures into that utility parcel with language stating that it's a non-residential parcel. That way, the appraisal can be completed, and we just have to have a certain amount in order to meet our match for those RCO grants. I'm expecting to get the appraisal today, and I'll get the review appraiser going. The reviewer's already been working on it. We did have to check in with RCO about doing an extraordinary assumption because this is a little complicated. They pre-approved that, so I think we're in good shape. We're projected to try and conclude this by the end of the year. If we don't, we'll have to get an extension on the grant. I don't think that'll be a problem, but everything's looking basically okay. So I will keep you updated. Next thing, forthcoming projects. Right now, we're working on a conservation easement donation. You've all heard about this one. This is the Demetric property on Lopez. It's a 10-acre property north of Channel Preserve. So this is a donation, and the PA's office is now working on that, and hopefully we'll get that concluded in the next couple of months. We do have some pending things happening. I need to really get back on a resale project on San Juan for the Alderman property, which is along Baylor Hill Road. It's a 10-acre property, and the intention forever has been to resell that property with no development units. So we've had an appraisal done. I need to now move the county council process forward for actually making that happen. So they need to make certain decisions as in direct sale or auction. We'll need to advertise. There were a number of steps that need to be done in order to make that one happen. Also, we've got a couple of outstanding ones. I'm not going to mention the other resale projects we've got going, but we did talk about a conservation easement sometime back on Nesca Farm, which is on this island. It's a 15-acre farm, and the owner's wanting us to purchase a conservation easement. Basically, I put this on hold until we get through reauthorization. So we'll be revisiting that when we know the answer in November. I think it's a good project.
What is the zoning on that property?
It's R5, so it's actually a little bit less than 15 acres. It could be two parcels. There's one residence on it, which is a historic house. She's looking to eliminate the other development unit, basically as a way to keep the property instead of having to sell that piece off to someone to develop. And that's about all I've got.
Is there some talk about combining that with the adjoining piece?
Well, that particular property is in an interesting area. It's adjacent to a very large piece, over 100-acre piece.
Sarah?
Exactly, and we haven't had any conversations with her about what her intentions are with that property. There's also another adjoining farm, which actually is run cooperatively
Right,
with Nesco.
that was the one that was.
Yeah, so there are possibilities out there, but this is the one we've got at this point. That's it.
I think it has interesting merit, and I think it would be even more interesting if we could expand the benefit.
Definitely. Yeah, one interesting development on that property, they have entered into a contract with Ferry Boat Seeds, which grows native seeds. So
I know about them.
good use of the land.
That's cool.
Good. Okay, that takes us to the break. I'm gonna take a nice long break this morning.
We haven't worked yet.
Yeah, I know. We're cooking along. Why don't we take a break until 9:35? 15-minute break?
Yeah. I have some stuff to drop off at the fair. I'll be back.
Don't speak on it. Hey, Lincoln. You know what, Lincoln?
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, it is 9:35 and I will call the meeting back to order with the stewardship report.
All right, so the first thing on there is the ag leasing update, and we've been continuing to work through details with both of the applicants. I think we've really gotten through all the major details, but our hope is to get something back to the commission, for the commission to approve, at the September meeting. And then we'll take it to council and go from there, but everything looks like it's in good shape at this point.
So we'll get to take a look at that lease before it.
Yes.
Meeting.
Should the lease committee look at it again? Or maybe it hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I
Okay,
mean, I think we're just about there, so,
that's good.
So is this the Grange parcel or the other one?
both of them.
Okay, both of them.
So the other one's less complicated.
Yes.
The Grange proposal.
Yes.
It's a lot of moving parts to it. So there's that one, and then,
Excuse me, can I just ask who is the lease committee? Is it?
Cindy, Mike.
You are the
And
ag committee is the same as the lease committee. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were talking about. Thanks.
okay,
So we have somebody from WDFW.
Yeah.
why don't we? We've got them on, why don't we do the Pike thing first?
Well, I think Aaron Rock's gonna put up a couple things just to front load this. I believe you are all up to speed a little bit on the situation of the Northern Pike that were illegally introduced to the lake/pond at Lime Kiln. And so really want to talk to about today is just a little bit of the background on that site, and then turn it over to Justin Spinelli from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife to talk a little bit about where the department is at in terms of options for management of that incident. So go ahead and go forward there. So Lime Kiln's located on the west side of San Juan Island. And this pond is actually a constructed pond. The scale of these two maps are not quite the same. I didn't attempt to get that to the same level. But the one on the right is just one of several development scenarios. We kind of ended up with this in that there was a planned development for Lime Kiln, called Lime Kiln Village. And this is one of the layouts that shows all the different residential developments and condominiums and things that were planned for that site. And this pond was constructed as part of that effort. I've heard different things, never really had it confirmed of, it was potentially going to be a surface water to provide potable water for the development. Freshwater resources are one of the things that are really challenged out on that side of the island. Go ahead and go forward there. And so you may also hear this referred to as different names, Lime Kiln Pond, West Side Pond, Reflection Pond, Sam's Pond. And most recently, Google has started calling it Carefree Lake. And so that seems to be named after, there's a neighborhood or a road nearby called Carefree. And so that's, Carefree, that might be more appropriate. Moving quick this morning, so. But the Reflection Pond one, this gives a good idea of why some locals refer to it as such. So if you hear different names, yes, they all kind of all are that. And is it a pond or a lake? Yes, it's kind of right on the threshold depending on your definition. So, go ahead and go forward. So this is an aerial view. Historically, before there was a dam installed at the southwest side, which is to the left of the map here. This probably had a little wetland complex in it. There's some wetlands nearby. And really at this point, there's essentially sort of two basins. There's that northern smaller lobe, and you can see maybe just barely make out that cattails, kind of a floating mat of cattails at the shallow part. Conjoins or separates the two basins there. Go ahead and go forward. So in terms of fish, When I first started with the land bank, I inherited an interesting problem where the dam mechanism had been accidentally damaged, and it had been plugged with a piece of remnant carpet and a bag of concrete. It remained like that for about 4 years before we were able to get a repair going. And during that time, the contractor was really pushing us to introduce fish for sport fishing. There were little native sticklebacks that we saw in the pond pretty regularly at that point. About a year after we finished the repair, all of a sudden, there were these little bluegill pumpkin seed fish that had showed up in the pond. And unbeknownst to me, right around 2016, 2018, largemouth bass were also introduced into the pond. And then most recently, northern pike. Right around 2019, water quality seemed to be kind of degrading, and there was a kind of a decrease in wildlife observations, particularly waterfowl, but also other different things ranging from amphibians to things like kingfishers. So, okay, go ahead, go for it. Yeah.
So are there any rules about people introducing these species? I would imagine there are.
Be a good question for Justin. Certainly
Okay.
for the pike, it is very much illegal.
Yeah.
And this is like one of probably 2 species of the highest level of concern for the state. And so this was actually turned into us by a local youth who was a part of the Youth Conservation Corps and had caught this fish, and the photos got on to shared with our local Fish and Wildlife representative, Elizabeth Tate, and kind of started all of this things in motion. Okay, go ahead. And so just to give an idea too, I just threw this in here. If you're wondering, like, where did northern pike come from? So the orange is kind of the extent of the native habitat as it's understood. And then the maroon are areas where it has been introduced. So we get our own little dot now in the San Juan Islands. And you can see there also is a tiny little dot where Lake Washington and Lake there's some that have been introduced there as well. And so I did put a little chart together at the top that talk about some different management options that are being considered. But I really do want to, at this point, turn it over to Justin, I think, to give a little bit more of an overview of the seriousness of this situation and what Fish and Wildlife is wanting to do. They did draft a proposal that I'd hoped to circulate for today, but that draft has not been approved at sort of the higher management levels at Fish and Wildlife yet. So we'll hope to get that out to you here as soon as possible. So, Justin.
Hello, everyone. Justin Spinelli. I am a regional biologist for this area with Washington Fish and Wildlife. My job is pretty much all lake management and waters from Whatcom County to King County and including the San Juan Islands. Doug did most of the hard work in preparing a presentation and all that stuff. I just have to talk today, so I'm kind of excited. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. So northern pike, they're a non-native fish predator from the east coast and the Arctic, right? They stretch for all the way from northern Maine all the way up into Alaska, across Canada and stuff like that, and they dip into the U.S. East of the Rockies and then down into kind of their southern part of the ranges somewhere in like northern Iowa or something like that. In their habitats, they tend to just kind of coexist with everyone, right? But when they get introduced outside of their native range, they become problematic, right? Which is why we call them an invasive species rather than like a non-indigenous or non-native or something like that. In Washington, they're classified as a level 1 prohibited species, which means that they have extremely high risk of becoming invasive, right? And invasive means they'll spread quickly and they'll cause harm to local wildlife and economies and culturally important things, stuff like that, right? There's a lot of non-native species around that we find value in and manage for, right? But in Washington State, not northern pike. Because we have salmon, we have ESA, we have lots of resources. We're concerned that they will highly impact. And even just at the local level without ESA listed species, right? They're a top level fish predator. When you look at them, you can see they're extremely aggressive. They're an ambush predator, and they can eat things up to a third their body length. Now, when you know that's a typical thing for fish, but when the fish might grow up to 45 pounds, you can imagine they're eating big fish, right? When they're doing that. And a fish that large needs a lot of calories, so they eat a lot of fish. So that's where we start coming in, running into problems, if you will. They'll overgraze a population of fish, then they'll switch to other species, and eventually they'll eat everything out, and it'll become a bunch of northern pike that are super skinny and poor condition and all that fun stuff. That fish managers get really excited about, but really what it means is that the native fauna have gotten grazed out of the pond, which is a problem, right? Yeah, let's see here. The other fun facts, right? They can live up to 20 years or around 20 years, is kind of an average long life for a pike. And females can produce up to 40,000 eggs per female. So when you're thinking about that, like they're predatory, they produce lots of babies, they become very abundant very quickly, all problematic in Washington. Let's see here. In Limekiln, Carefree, Westside Pond, whatever we want to call it, lake. We were out twice this spring, in March and April. We use gill nets to capture fish in the springtime when they're getting ready to spawn. Pike are highly mobile and they aggregate into groups, and so using gill nets to assess their population or capture them is a really effective tool at that time of year. Right, the rest of the year you can catch them, but they tend to be spread out, in their own little territories trying to eat. So it's less efficient to try to capture them. We captured 22 fish, right? So we captured 19 males and 3 females. All the fish were sexually mature, right? We were able to identify whether they were male or female, and we were confident they were sexually mature. One female in April only had a few eggs left, so it looked like she had spawned. So we had at least one spawning event. We had a spawning event happen sometime in the interim between our trip in March, which is when we caught a very gravid female, large skeins of eggs, to that mid-April timeframe, which is when they must have spawned. So now we kind of know when they want to spawn in Limekiln. So that was something we learned. Besides the fact that they're big in there, right? They were, I think the largest fish was 24 inches, I think. Let's see here. WDFW has basically identified this population. I mean, all pike, we want to eradicate all pike where we find them. It's not always possible, right? Like you think about the reservoirs in the Upper Columbia where they're present right now. Like those are huge bodies of water, tons of area. There's other species that that are tough to impact, like to avoid impacts on. But really, it's a matter of space and time, right? We don't have enough people or gear or anything to target the fish. We can't get all the fish in one place, so we can't really truly eradicate them. Same with Lake Washington. They've been introduced into Lake Washington. They've been around for a few years. Our crews caught several. I want to say several. It might have been 3. So I might be exaggerating a little bit, but they did catch them, right? And that's concerning, right? For a lot of reasons. But again, that water is huge, right? It's going to be virtually impossible, probably impossible to eradicate them. We could suppress them in that situation, try to keep their numbers low so that they don't have as much of an impact, but it takes a lot of time and energy. So eradication is not possible. Now, in a place like Limekiln, we feel that eradication is possible. And so since it's possible, we want to pursue it, right? It's a relatively small water, it's isolated. We can have a great impact on it with relatively little effort. And I say relatively little, I mean, it's still going to take effort, but way less than a huge water body that's, lots and lots of acres. And the reason we want to remove these fish from the pond is because this becomes a source population in the Puget Sound, right? They made it out to San Juan Island. They can be moved to the mainland relatively easy. So this is why we want to remove that population. We want to partner with the land bank to do so. So any questions to this point? I'm kind of a rambler, so feel free to interrupt and ask questions. Yes?
Where do people get the fish that they introduce?
That's a good question. We took genetic samples and sent them back east to be run against all different variety of different panels. And I never got told what those results were. I've got a question out. I've asked. Right now, our staff are drowning in zebra mussels across the state, and so they're having trouble keeping up on things. So I'm not really sure. But what I believe is that they were not a Washington-based fish. We believe they came from elsewhere, maybe ordered online, and showed up in a box. So it's a big. There are some weaknesses in our ability to prevent them, but that's reality. So part of this campaign is probably going to be to start to reach back out to all facilities in North America that we can find that produce northern pike and let them know it's not legal to ship them here. So that needs to be done. The last time that was done was, I think, 10 or 15 years ago. So it's about time to be done again, right? Any other questions?
So Justin, Anne Marie Shanks, I just was curious, you're not talking about doing a catch and release somewhere else, right? You're talking about totally eradicating them?
Yeah. Total eradication is the goal, right? We don't want them around. If they're around, they are
right.
They're a temptation.
Is that because they're a great sports fish for catching?
Yeah. I mean, somebody put them there because they wanted to fish for them, right? And so if they're around, then we want them in this lake too, right? And then we'll go moving them, right? People moving fish happens more frequently than it should, right? It's illegal in Washington to transport live wildlife without a permit. So and it's illegal to introduce them without, there are penalties, and I'm not going to get into them necessarily. But yeah, it's illegal to move these fish around and stock them elsewhere, right? Without authorization from the department. The department's has been delegated, to manage this type of stuff. So, and we would not approve a permit to put pike anywhere or move them around. If anglers catch them, we ask that they kill the fish on site and then report it to us. And there's a variety of reporting methods. There's some resources online. I can share those through Doug or Lincoln or whatever. Those methods were, I think, were on our sign too that got cut down at the lake. But there's there are ways for folks to let us know. And again, it's okay if you catch one, we want you to kill it and report it and keep the specimen on ice, hopefully, preferably, so we can come out and collect it and get some genetic information from them. Let's see here. You ready to talk about eradication methods? Fun stuff? All right. So I don't know if you've heard about the introductions of northern pike in southeast Alaska, but that happened several years ago now. But the Department of Alaska Fish and Game has got a pike management group that's working in lakes across that area. And I mean, these fish have been eating salmon and just gorging and becoming really abundant. So they're looking at all kinds of methods. The reason I talk about Alaska is because they're very organized, and they're looking at all types of different methods for eradicating pike, right? So they've done a lot of the work for us, if you will, in trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, right? There's lots of novel methods out there we can try. What it boils down to, what they have found is that there are two primary methods, or the two sure methods for eradicating are using the pesticide rotenone, right? It's a pesticide that it means it targets fish in general, but not really. We'll talk about that in a sec. Or dewatering. So removing all the water from the water body, right? Making it so the fish can't live there. Those are the only two methods that have been identified as successful for eradication, right? All other methods are considered a suppression technique, you know, which means they're going to persist at low abundance on some level in most cases. So rotenone is a product that is derived from the roots of a plant, mostly in South America, or I think in South America. I don't have the details in my head, I apologize, but so just ground up root is what that is. And what it does is it blocks the oxygen receptors in the gills, and so it prevents the fish from extracting oxygen from the water. What that means is it also prevents the extraction of oxygen through gills of all organisms that might be doing that at the time. So that means it could impact amphibians, right? The tadpole stage of the water stage. It can impact aquatic invertebrates, things like that. We usually apply rotenone in the fall to avoid the amphibian impacts as much as possible, right? Because most of them have metamorphosed into air breathers, and so they're able to avoid or they're not impacted directly necessarily by the product. So there's ways of mitigating that cost, but there is a bit of a cost to the environment. The other method we'll switch to is dewatering, right? So Doug mentioned that the pond is, it's an artificial impoundment, right? It's got an outlet structure. The water level can be regulated quite a bit. But not to the extent that it would dewater it completely. So that method at Limekiln would include some kind of pumping and siphoning to remove more water from the basin to get it as dry as possible, to see if we don't know if we can get it dry or not, but we do feel like it's feasible, right? We feel like both of those methods are feasible at Limekiln because of that reason, because of the water control structure and its size and its depth. So let's see here. Any questions about methods for eradication? Okay.
Would the two methods be possibly equally effective? Or is there a difference there?
Well, we've got the most confidence in rotenone, right? We've got a lot of experience with it. We know how to apply it. We can apply it quickly and effectively and fully saturate the water column with it. So therefore it becomes effective. Dewatering, there's some uncertainty there about how effective are we going to be at dewatering completely. We think it's worth a shot, right? But it will be a challenge, right? Because water is always probably coming in, right? We expect it might not be flowing a lot, but there's always water coming in. So there's always some maintenance involved. And there's going to be, potential challenges with keeping pumps running, right? Keeping water flowing through hoses and things like that. So then there's the question of, well, can we move that much water? Is it even possible to do that? And so there's some uncertainty there. So I'd say yes, kind of.
I've got a question.
Mike has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I just, the first option, that's not a chemical, is that right?
Well, yes and no. Rotenone comes in two forms. It comes in a wettable powder, which is it's like a powder, like a talc powder type consistency, and that's just the ground up root. It also comes in a liquid form that does include some chemicals because it includes emulsifiers to keep the product in suspension and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of chemical component to that, technically.
Is there any long-term ramification of either one of those applications? I mean, I'm assuming that we do this, we kill all the fish, all of the fish, and then we refill the pond, or not. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's essentially how it works. And rotenone breaks down pretty quickly in the environment. It binds with organics very readily. And so its persistence will probably, the persistence we tend to see is about a month of toxicity, and then it breaks down. Sunlight breaks it down, water temperature breaks it down, warmer temperatures break it down. All those things are breaking it down over time. And so it tends to last for about a month.
And how do you know it's been 100% effective?
Surveys afterwards, right?
Okay,
And
'cause
so part of this process would be revisiting the lake for 3 years afterwards, trying to identify whether or not fish have made it through.
Okay, thanks.
I have two questions. One is if the rotenone option is used, is the water retained in the pond until it passes that 1 month toxicity point before it's released into
Yep,
the stream?
that is the plan, right? That's that is one of the
And the second
objectives.
question is there a model in which you lower the water level significantly so that you use less of the product?
Yes. Yeah. We've talked about that a little bit too in house. We thought about it. There's a point where logistically the water could be too low to get equipment in and out of the pond and become effective in applying. So I think where the pond is right now is probably the lowest we'd want it, just because of logistics. But there are ways to get around that a little bit. It just makes it a little more challenging logistically to make the application.
Thank you.
Amy has a
Anne-Marie,
good
did
question.
you?
Yeah, I
Did
do,
you
but
have
go with
something?
Amy first.
Okay, Amy, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, my question was, I love birds, as I'm sure everybody in the room and online does. And so, with fall migration, I just would be concerned that there's a pretty potent, at least 1 month period where, a lot of, it's also called wood duck pond, and that they would be eating those toxic fish. And so I just, if this is the route, and I'm not saying I'm convinced yet that this is the best route, but if this were the route that the state chose, what would be a plan for basically hazing birds? Because I would just be really concerned that this would be sort of biomagnified up the food chain. Thanks.
Sure. That makes sense. And that's a good question and a concern to express. And there is an answer for it. I don't have it on the tip of my tongue. I want to give you the analogy, if you will, about it. But what I do know is that we do these routinely in Eastern Washington, and that's in the migratory pathway as well. And we do not have bird mortalities associated with the rotenone applications, and that's because the amount of product that it takes to affect the fish is significantly lower than the toxicity threshold for ingestion, right? But again, I can't give you a good analogy to kind of really describe that. But that's the course answer. But I can get back to you all on that with a little
Well,
more detail.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I guess if you've done it in Eastern Washington, are there reports from surveys you've done afterwards? Because I think, this island community is pretty conscious of these kinds of things. And I think if they hear that all of a sudden there's, some toxic chemical being put in, right there, they're going to be like, what the heck is going on? And so I think, being far more proactive with information is something that it's an essential here. So, and I would just want to know before you do that, because if you're talking about this fall, that's like right around the corner. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. I know it's coming up fast, right? Yeah. And so a public outreach is a component of this too, right? So public outreach is going to be necessary prior to any kind of application. And I'll have colleagues in the room who are much more familiar with answering those questions, right? So I'm in Western Washington. I don't do these projects very often. So we have an FAQ list, right? We've got answers to the concern you've got. I know it. I've seen it. I just cannot articulate it today. But yeah, we will have that kind of opportunity with the public for folks to express concern and challenge us, right? And really, frankly, make us work for it, right? But it's important that we do have that discourse prior to any kind of application.
Right,
Okay,
and
thank
Justin,
you.
I have a related question which has to do with other non-target species.
Mhm.
And what about like closer into the December, January window?
Mhm.
In terms of applications?
Yeah, yeah, it all depends on the rains, right? So a key component to a rotenone application would be to keep the water in the pond, right? Not have any outflow happening. When you have outflow happening, you have to start consider, well, you have to consider the downstream effects, right? If water's coming out, there's probably chemical moving downstream, or product, excuse me, not chemical. And so we have a landowner downstream that we'd be talking to as well as part of this component. We did walk the stream last month down there, and it looks we're confident that the product would break down throughout the course of the stream system as it gets encounters organics and stuff like that, as it moves through soil and things like that. But the waiting, going back to the question, waiting till later means we're risking more water coming in and either diluting the treatment or causing outflow type situations.
And are there
And
any
then-
studies on the non-target species?
Yeah, there's a variety of studies. And we've got those done. We've done like macroinvertebrate studies and invertebrate studies, and the rebound is somewhere around 1 to 3 months or something like that is when those critters rebound back, but they do recover. And so,
And
but we
I'm
can
thinking like
provide that.
fox and squirrel and raccoons and all those
Right.
other guys that are gonna be feeding around the pond.
Right. And that comes back to the consumption, answer that I kind of
Right,
gave
okay.
imperfectly, right? Is I think you have to drink a lot of water in order for it to have an issue, right? And similarly, you got to eat a lot of food to have an issue.
Go ahead, Meryl.
Just a quick question. Is there any effort made, and I know this is ridiculously time consuming, to collect the dead fish or before the birds can get to them or other wildlife can get to them?
Yeah, that could be something we can look at. But you're right. It'll be a lot of work. I mean, it's we'd be asking for help, but we can certainly, that could be something to consider as part of the project. How hard it is will depend upon the number of fish that are actually present in the lake. Looks like there's a lot of bluegill in there for sure. You can see them right along the shoreline and stuff. And, we don't know how many pike are in there left, right? So it'll just kind of depend on how much is there. But yeah, I think cleaning it up or as much as possible, it'll depend, those logistics will kind of come into play. And then where do we get rid of them, right? Like that becomes a landfill thing, is that desirable for San Juan Island to have a bunch of fish brought to the landfill? So but there's some other steps that will be necessary to consider in that, but that can certainly be on the list.
I would add to Marilyn's point that it's not only a concern about the predators or scavengers, it's also a public relations concern. Fish carcasses will smell. So I think that definitely needs to be part of the plan.
Okay.
So I'm curious about how, what I'm hearing, and I think probably all of us feel, is the least toxic approach. I think that's important from a public relations perspective, from a wildlife perspective, but we certainly want to get rid of them. So how are you gonna make this decision, and what do you want from us? I would like to review more information, and I'm sure you can see this more.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming to you with the two strategies that we've got. Our recommendation for a quick response would be the rotenone application, right? But we also feel like the drawdown is a feasible option that that should be explored a bit more. We are in favor of exploring that more if that's what the land bank and the board would prefer. There's risks associated with that not working and taking some additional time. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those risks aren't worth, trying, right? Or that strategy isn't worth trying. So we're open to either option, keeping rotenone in the back pocket as the secondary option, if you will, because we agree, like, the less chemical approach, the better, right? Whether that be a drawdown or a drawdown plus rotenone to reduce the amount of product in the environment and in the community.
May I add a
Peter,
comment?
please.
I just I've pumped out a couple of ponds, including in the last couple of weeks, and I've also used rotenone once some time ago. With pond pumping, depending on where you're pumping, there's often permitting involved. I had to demonstrate that we were pumping it down slowly, not sending water into sensitive areas or wetlands or the sound. And pumping is definitely, in my experience, an incomplete process, a difficult process. I mean, a lot depends on the pond, but you almost always end up with some water in the end. There's also impacts to amphibians and others, aquatic invertebrates. It's been a while, but I've read a little bit about rotenone's ecological impacts, and I actually I could probably dig up a paper. I remember there was one by the National Park Service, and it seems to me that the data show it's pretty low toxicity to birds, mammals. I mean, there's definitely toxicity to aquatic insects and amphibians, but I think the timing of it is key. If you can get it done while the amphibians are at their least present, I guess. And also, I mean, you also get all those other non-native fish out in one fell swoop. We actually buried carp, tens of thousands of them, in a farm field in rows, as fertilizer. So, it's one option. They don't need to go into some single hole. It can be spread out in trenches and then buried. So I generally, with all the factors involved, I would favor the rotenone approach, but leave it all to you.
Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a couple things to respond to. One, just in the toxicity and understanding the sort of mechanism of rotenone. If it's interfering with oxygen and gills, then for mammals and birds and things, again, it seems like it's going to be relatively different in terms of what it might have impact-wise. So just keeping that in mind. In terms of what we know of the pond for amphibians, historically we have had observations of red-legged frogs there, which was a listed species. I think they were delisted maybe a decade ago or so, but still sensitive. And it's been at least a decade probably since I've seen a red-legged frog out and around that property. There are Ruskin newts, and with the newts, they are, I'm increasingly noticing that they're staying in the aquatic form year round in a lot of places out here in the island. So they're not necessarily all of them, but that would be something that would likely be, collateral damage to some level, would be some Ruskin newts as well. In terms of invertebrates, we don't have surveys out there. Who knows what's present? With what Peter was saying, I think is probably accurate, that the sum total of things, the rotenone is probably going to have less of an impact than the dewatering does. But I agree that in terms of the optics and the concerns within the community here, that option is going to be very frowned upon. So is there, I think part of what's driving this is the immediacy of action that's being asked. Timing wise for us, it's a delicate time, and there may be that we will end up having some capacity to do a combination of different actions. With the dewatering, and Justin can speak to this a little bit more, and again, when we get the proposal back, the idea was not just a single dewatering, but doing a dewatering, maintaining water levels low, through this next year. And then doing a subsequent dewatering, kind of the same thing, late summer, or fall next year again. So there could be some sort of combination in there. It doesn't seem like there's any one like perfect good solution. And within the timing, we've had some conversations back and forth. This is not a management action that was considered in our management plan. Imagine that. And this is not something that's in our IMP integrated, or IPM, integrated pest management sort of protocols either. So while we're having a public meeting today, obviously we don't have a lot of the public present. It does seem to me that it's very important that we do some sort of communication and outreach with the public on this, one way or another, before taking some like large management action. That said, in our conversations with Justin, for the state to get into that process, they're looking at late fall, winter before they're able to be able to host that kind of a meeting. Which, if we start moving into dewatering during the winter, we're going to have, broader impacts from that as we're getting into that time of year for amphibians, and probably a lesser extent in terms of migratory waterfowl things, because that use has dropped significantly in the last few years. But that timing issue is something that's sort of lingering. So that is one of the questions when Justin and I were speaking of, is there any sort of mechanism that would allow to start the dewatering before we go through some larger public process? What's your comfort level with that, as well as these different management options that are on the table?
Let me make a comment on that, and Mike, I will recognize you. The timing is obviously critical. It seems to me that we can't do anything before the beginning of November. And when you talk about we as the project manager or our doing public outreach, it seems to me that we have to be clear. Is this a land bank project, or is this a Fish and Wildlife project? I would be very comfortable in saying the Fish and Wildlife Services is making us do this.
Well, they'll be doing, they're the leads, they have management authority, and I just want to say it's been really great that they're coming to us and asking, what are your needs? How can we help? How can we work together on this?
Yeah.
So yes, definitely.
That's great.
WDFW project, but really appreciate Justin and his cohort and their willingness to work with us.
Yeah. Thank you. Mike? Mike, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. I wondered if you had any time and cost now for the two options, how long it would take and how much it would cost them. And I wonder, I'm challenging a little bit the idea that it's time sensitive, that we've got to do it right away. Because it seems to me that if we wait a year, all we've done is lost a whole bunch of bluegill. And we still have a lot of these fish that we're going to have to eradicate one way or the other. So I'm just curious about waiting or seeing how this plays out rather than push it because it happens to be August and we got to get it done in the fall. Thanks.
I would say that the thing is the risk level of those fish getting transported. When Fish and Wildlife first came out here, there was rumors that some youth had actually gone in, caught fish and moved them to other ponds on the island. There's been environmental DNA tests done and which have not turned up anything yet, but that is still a possibility that they already have been moved. Now, they're looking at this from this macro level of like Washington State as a whole. When we kind of get down to our own little fiefdom here, and we have some really special fish populations in the island. These coastal cutthroat populations that are known to have through the genetic tests are isolated to these systems that go back 5,000 years and things. So there's these remnants that are, it's just very special. and you start throwing, some of these fish in there, that could be sort of game over for those populations. So it's very serious in terms of what the potential impacts and ramifications are here locally, but also throughout the entire region.
I feel like this is an important, issue. Obviously, it's an important opportunity for us to demonstrate our, responsibility for the assets that we manage. So I wouldn't shy away from coming up with, both public meetings, for information. I mean, I've learned a lot just in this meeting and in moving forward with a, whatever plan we decide on. And personally, I favor dewatering plus having, if we have to use the rotenone, then that's something. But I don't feel like we can shy away from it, even though we're in this tender season, because it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we take this seriously, which we have to.
Well, I wanted to introduce Beth Tate first. She's just joining us. Beth, I don't know if you wanted to listen in or add something.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. My name's Beth Tate. I am a resident of San Juan Island, and I'm also the habitat biologist covering San Juan County. So I'm not directly involved with a lot of things going on with, fish and things like that, but I do evaluate habitats for aquatic construction projects. So I'm here to just listen. I'm an interested resident. I'm also trying to support our fish program as best I can for whatever we need to do with the things going on at Limekiln Pond.
Thank you, Beth.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, I'm seeing a lot of opportunity here, because like hearing about the cutthroat population, and it feels like there's a lot of education that needs to happen, like broadly and pretty quickly. Somehow, how do we get out to those kids about what they're doing and the impact to that? And I guess I'm partly curious about whether, and I like your question about, is this a WDFW project or a land bank project? Justin and maybe Beth on this one too, have you kind of had to run a successful kind of public relations outreach in an area that's as sensitive as, or as opinionated as we are around here?
Define success. I think everyone's sense is that, is quite accurate. It's kind of a challenging type of situation and environment to talk about. I think it's, but I also, maybe it's naivete, but I like to think that like this conversation, right? I think most folks at the table are probably pretty skeptical of rotenone, right? And become a little more comfortable through a conversation. And my hope is that additional outreach would help with that, right? And to kind of get an idea of understanding what the risk rewards are, right? The risk is extremely high for keeping pike around there and moving them around the environment. And removals, whether when whatever option we choose as to move forward with, are costly and impactful, right? One way or another, right? There's always an impact there. That's part of the cost of having pike moved around. So my hope is that the outreach type opportunities can kind of get that understood, right? And hopefully, eliminate some of the myths around, rotenone or any pesticides. I'm kind of a pesticide supporter. I think that less can be more, but that's a personal philosophy. Let's see here. Did I answer the whole question? I'm starting to ramble here.
I have
yeah.
Well, I'm just curious when I think we'll be talking about this down the road. Kind of long-term strategy, since we don't have any guarantee if we maintain it as this pond, that it won't just be restocked. Your sign's already been taken down, and there is active people that are interested in doing this. So some of the short-term in terms of trying to support biodiversity. But then also long-term, what are we looking at if we just find ourselves in this same situation? And I'm not saying to discuss that now. I think we've had great discussion, but when we do cost benefits and things like that, what are we really trying to accomplish on this preserve?
I was gonna bring up something related to that too, which is that this is a constructed pond, and it was, to our understanding, the dam was built and all the mechanisms and things went in the early 1980s. So we're approaching 50 years, which is about the lifespan of all of that good metal material that was put underground. And we've already had some issues with some of the mechanical parts of the dam. Dewatering will give us a chance to inspect some of that stuff a little bit more closely. Mostly it's been done with snorkel. But that is a consideration for the long term is for costs and desires and intents for that site. Do we want to continue to maintain that as a reservoir, as a developed thing? The original intent was as a water for development. That's not happening. Wildlife has adjusted to having that presence there, but there are costs associated with maintaining that structure and whatnot as well. So it's just another part of the mix that this opens the door in some ways to have that conversation with the community as well. Is we're moving forward. There's going to be costs associated with this. What do we envision potentials for this site?
So it seems like what I hear you saying is that another option here is to take out the dam and to just let it go back to its natural state, the whole area.
Yeah, I mean, or something approximating that. Yeah, we have the opportunity to do some sort of restoration work there. And that would, I'm not prepared to like.
Right, no, I get it, but if you're looking at all the options, that's an option that should be up there with dewatering.
Yeah, completely, yeah.
I mean, I
But it's
personally think
something
that,
Like we weren't, when we did the last management plan, we weren't at that point in terms of priorities and things. It's just something that's kind of been on the back burner, but we're certainly, again, for sort of the lifespan of the equipment and knowing that our costs are going to increase and things, it's something worth considering for sure.
how deep is it?
Not very deep. In fact, that's one thing that Justin and cohort did, and there's actually a bit bathymetric map in the last part of that presentation, but it's, I think at the deepest point, about 8 to 10 feet deep, something like that. It covers about 10 acres, and I think there's.
Doug, that's a good question, but it's a big question and one that I don't see being resolved this fall. If the department would like to go forward with the pike eradication, Justin, obviously the commissioners have raised a lot of really important questions for you in the department to answer here. I don't know whether you've taken notes, but you can go back and watch our videotape. I think that what we need is some answers to those questions and a written proposal that we can respond to. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for and on what timeline, but we're in the middle of August now. As a couple of us have mentioned, we have an election coming up in November, which is very critical to us and depends highly on public opinion. So that's going to weigh into our consideration a whole lot. I hope that you'll come back to us with a specific proposal that we can respond to as timely as possible. Peggy?
And I think I kind of just said this, but I think the idea of adding this third option of the rotenone or the dewatering and or restoration. So restoring it to
Natural state.
That'll be, long term.
I have one last question.
Go ahead, Mary.
Has there ever been a press release about this issue?
Yeah,
There
about
was
the pipe.
something about the,
There was one, there was a story on
About
it.
the pipe.
Somebody
Yeah.
wrote a story about it.
Okay, thank you.
but But I haven't seen anything since then.
Right.
And the fact that somebody's moving them.
Yeah. And-
There's a lot there.
I just want to go back to Aaron's comment, which I think was a very, very good idea, that when we do this, it would be really good to have some knowledgeable allies who are on the side of community ecology and restoration to be advocates for this project. And I think it would be essential for Fish and Wildlife to be definitely out front ahead of us. And that means on the community relations as well.
Yeah, can I respond to a little bit of that? Let's see here. So I better write my notes down or I'm gonna get lost. So as far as, this project, we do envision this as a WDFW project, but we're partnering with the landowner or the land bank, right? So this is a partnership type thing is what the way we'd like to move forward with this, but as the lead. So we're not asking land bank to step out in front as a shield or anything like that, right? So that's not something that's being asked. In the near term, we are requesting that we start the dewatering process as soon as possible. If that just means opening the valve and letting another foot or foot and a half drain from the pond slowly, or or fast, I guess, well, how fast you want to. That would be helpful in limiting the amount of habitat available, right? What I heard today is that it sounds like some version that includes rotenone is somewhat acceptable, at least for it to be entertained seriously. And so I'll go back to my team here about that, and we'll come up with a better short-term plan, if you will. And then yeah, as far as timelines go, the if we were just to try dewatering, it would take a couple seasons, right? That's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. Rotenone, I'm not sure if we can get a rotenone project off the ground this fall, but we might be able to. It depends on honestly, this conversation was kind of one of those linchpins, right? So understanding that the palatability, at least on some level, is helpful for us. I'll have to come back to you with kind of more like, well, what can we do this quickly type of answer. And all these questions, even though I wasn't necessarily able to answer them with a lot of detail, we are experienced at answering these questions. We are prepared to answer those questions, right? I just haven't been the person that in the public meetings talking about it, so I'm still learning. Let's see here. And yeah, so I think that is pretty sure I covered it all, but we'll definitely be in touch. Right?
Okay.
One more question, given the fact that we only meet once a month and how, so that kind of affects the timeline.
Yep.
And how do we deal with that?
Can we have a special meeting?
What?
If we want to.
I don't think we need to have a special meeting. I mean, what we need is a written proposal, which hopefully we would receive before our next meeting. So we would be ready at least to discuss it more, and go from there. If we don't, as I think, we don't want to go do anything except maybe some public outreach before November, we have a little time for that.
Beth, did you have something?
Okay.
No.
No, and I feel like I probably missed some stuff before I jumped on. But yeah, I was just wondering if we needed to talk more about this proposal, which just came up again.
We definitely do.
I was just wondering, Peter had mentioned permits. And would that be going through WDFW, or would the landowners need to apply for those?
some of that would go through me. So depending on what's proposed, if there's any installation of equipment into the pond, that would be a permit I would issue. And I think that if it's easier, DFW could act as an agent for the landowner to do that. We'd have to talk about that a little more, and it depends on what the proposal is. Depending on what we're doing, if we're just opening the valve, that doesn't really require a permit to do that, but it sort of depends on what's happening and what we decide to do moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
So a lot of good questions. Sounds like there are a lot of questions to be answered. So Justin, thanks for the information, and we'll look forward to more.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Hope everyone else did too.
And Brian, just, talking in terms of communication and everything, based on the level of communication and outreach that would be required for the public in the San Juan Islands to understand this issue, I don't see it happening this fall. I think there's too much education that's required for this. And I just don't see how that happens. I mean, there's a whole piece of this that has to do with the fact that somebody is actually destroying the ponds here, the ponds that have been man-made at least. And that's a whole education effort. There's almost, in my mind, a level of shame that has to go on with that kind of behavior. And that takes a while to get out. I mean, you need months to have a message soak down into the media, or from the media into the public about what's really happening. So, and there's so many stages to this. I don't see where you're doing this before next year.
Whether
You
we're
could start the
doing-
dewatering.
Does that have to happen before an action is taken? though?
Oh, God,
Yeah.
yes, here,
I don't-
yes.
I don't know that shaming the perpetrators has to happen
If they're
before.
moving the fish, it does.
Well, I agree that we need a strong public outreach
Yeah.
discussion about the whole issue, but I also feel that we need to act as quickly and carefully as possible because of the potential risk to other ponds from this pond.
We need to balance that.
Yeah.
Whether we're doing the right thing or not, there are people ready to jump on us and tell us we're not, tell the public that we're
Right.
not. So we have to be very.
The sign that was taken down, what did it say?
It's just one of their sort of normal signs of, pike are illegal, if caught, do this, whatever. And, somebody actually, they could have just taken, 2 screws out and taken the sign, but they chose to cut it down with a chainsaw. So there was some messaging there.
Okay, that's just something.
So maybe we can start an education campaign about the problem, about the pike now, before we start talking about what we want to do about it.
And what's successful, really?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna convince.
Right,
everyone
right,
either,
got
so-
it.
Yeah.
But, starting to worry about time.
Oh, we're fine this time.
Great.
I'm trying to recall too, I think we have 17 ponds on land bank reserves on San Juan Island, something like that, so. We have
Yeah,
a lot of potential.
there's a problem.
I have to take off early.
Okay.
I don't apologize.
That's fine.
Thank you.
See you later at the fair. Okay, thanks. All right, I think we're up to public comment. Do we have any public?
No, wait,
Oh, what is
Want to
that?
do the North Shore update?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Skip that.
Peter will be.
No, I said we skipped that. So, are you gonna do that, Peter?
I will. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And am I sharing my screen? Just the photo there?
Yep. Looks good.
Cool. Yeah, so I've got about, I think, 10 or 11 photos. Before I jump into that, I just wanted to acknowledge the work of many here. Aaron Rock, and I see John Kane there. I mean, those two have helped to get, I think, at least 11 contracts through for this project over the last couple of years. Archaeological and cultural resources, ecological, geotechnical, wetland delineation, electrical, asbestos removal, restoration, well testing, construction. And then, with 11 or more contracts comes probably 50 invoices. So couldn't have done this without all of Aaron's support. And then Aaron Halcomb, has helped with more than helped with the interim management plan and the final management plan that's coming out shortly. And then in other ways as well. And Tyler and Mary, a lot of hours on the ground out there. So big team effort. And also Lincoln, supporting this vision that's probably a little out of the ordinary for the land bank. We could have gone a much easier path here, but I think we're doing things on this property that make it meet its highest and best uses for the ecology generally, for water resources, wildlife, and ultimately the users. I think it's going to be a really great preserve, and excited to get it open. So I'm going to focus in on the yellow and red circles here. The yellow is the former pond, and the red is the former in-house, and then the blue there is the approximate location of the parking area. So I'd say we're about halfway through the project now. We're moving in total about 5,000 cubic yards of material around, almost all within the site, hardly about 150 cubic yards maybe of concrete and other debris are in the process of leaving now. Most of that's gone already, but so just a tremendous amount of material moving around. I was commenting the other day that it's just an incredible amount of damage the previous owners did to this property. I mean, you have to think about it over the course of decades, and we're undoing a lot of it in a month, but it's an amazing amount of manipulation. But so let me just jump here ahead. Why isn't my slide advancing? Huh. Oh, there we go. So we started on August 5th, and after receiving, I think, the last of about 8 permits for this project. So there's the house foundation and a row of straw bales there for erosion control. Then, kind of with a rock hammer, demolishing the foundation. Again, that's like 100+ cubic yards of concrete set right in the middle of a wetland. When we were digging there, you could see that wet spot there, just a little bit south of the truck. That's standing water about 1.5 feet below the soil surface. So very wet area, mostly, not right now unless you dig, but so you start to see the shape of the future wetland there taking shape. And here it is mostly graded. About half of it is cut off on the left side of the photo. There's still some concrete piled up over there, but we're kind of just reestablishing the natural contours. It drops down in 3 spots into shallow depressional wetland areas. And you could see a patch of green there in the center off to the left a little bit. That's an existing delineated wetland that we were basically working to that grade. Yeah, so it's really taken shape, and you can see in the distance there the deer fencing and the plantings off in the field. Here's the pond at about 6 inches below its normal summertime low level. And I've been tracking that for a couple of years with putting stakes in the ground. So we've got a sort of an average high and an average low based on 2 years. So this is about when we started pumping. There it is, mostly pumped out. That's Christian Oldham from Kwiat, looking for amphibians. The timing of this was really great. Most of the amphibians had already gone through their metamorphosis and moved on. We had some rough-skinned newt juveniles or nymph stage in the water, or salamander stage in the water, and Kwiat, Christian and his father, and myself, we were out there quite a bit, netting them out. We ended up putting them all into a pond liner that we pulled out of the other wetland by the house and filled with water. So they're in there finishing up their cycle. And so we feel like we had pretty minimal impacts on the amphibians. So even when we got the water out though, there was probably 6 feet of water logged muck that we couldn't pump. That's what I was talking about with the earlier conversation. It's really hard to completely pump out a pond. There's an aerial view. We've got a volunteer, Glenn Oust, who lives over in Deer Harbor, who's been helping with aerial imagery. And we also have a GoPro camera mounted on a tree in this area that'll do a kind of a time-lapsed series showing the berm dropping. But the truck there is on top of the berm, the excavator's at the far end of the berm, kind of lowering it. So the pond is going from, a roughly 9-foot deep hole to, we brought the elevation up about 8.5 feet. The idea is we're going to have a wide, shallow wetland area that hopefully will dry out at the end of the summer. It's kind of a little bit of a balancing act to not, we don't want to have a pond because we don't want bullfrogs, but we don't want to dry it out and lose wetland function. So I think we're, hopefully hitting the right balance. And there's a view from the other direction, kind of looking across the pond. The excavator or the bobcat there in the distance is roughly the center of the pond, and the berm on the left is in the process of being lowered there. And you can see the hydric soils, the dark soils in the middle. So we're kind of getting down to the pre-berm elevation there. It's not going to be exactly what it used to be, but I think it's going to be, should be functional. And the trail will go along the top of that berm. There's the overall site plan. I'll point out that forest trail is probably not going to happen for several years. We have some thinning work to do there, but the top 5 bullets are things we're pretty much done with. And then all the ones in italics are the things remaining to go. And we should be wrapping up in, after the first week of September or so, at least with the contractor responsibilities. And then staff will get in and install all the signage and get the toilet in there and seed and straw all the bare ground. And then we'll start planting herbaceous and woody plants in late October or so, and that'll go through February or so. That's all I have to show you. I'm happy to say that things seem to be going reasonably well, and we won't know for certain about getting through all of it before the proposed opening date, but I think we'll get there.
Very impressive.
Wow, yeah.
Thanks.
How are you doing for permits, Peter? You got all the permits you need?
I got all the permits, yes. I mean, one of them came in like the day before construction. So yeah, it's a lot of county permits and some state ones, but yeah, we're covered.
Good. Okay, thanks, Peter. That's great. Looking forward to the opening, which
Me
is
too.
September when?
28th.
28th. Very good. Okay. So second public comment period. I see Tracy Gottingham is here. Tracy, anything you want to say? Or any other members of the public I can't see?
Right,
Hi, Tracy.
can you hear me?
Yes.
I wasn't planning to comment, but I found the hike discussion incredibly engaging. And I just want to shout out to all the commissioners for your concern, your questions, the opportunities, and also the concern on timing for the upcoming election. I agreed with, all the discussions, and the person, sorry, I don't know you yet, who said possibly to do this in a year's time. Certainly it would be sensitive in my mind to do this in October. But I also have 13 acres of wetlands on our property and a pond as well. And so the idea of turning a man-made pond into a wetland, I would highly support. And I think that's it. I just always appreciate listening. The North Shore property, Peter, I saw that during the terrestrial managers tour, and I just can't wait to see what you've done. I walked through there seeing everything that needed to be done. And I just commend you. I commend the land bank. I commend the Preservation Trust for having that vision. So thank you. And good luck with Peggy for the fair, and Tanya and Erin, anyone who's working that fair. I'm sorry I'm not going to make it over there, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I get a lot of cleaning done while I listen, I have to admit. The dirty stuff. So I just so appreciate the Zoom. I so appreciate that we are at this stage with our technology. And Tanya, whatever you needed to do this morning to get the owl going, you did great by posting to us Zoomers that you were having difficulty. And I've never seen that before. You know, we're just thinking maybe we have the wrong link, but you just put right into the chat. Stay tuned. So thank you.
Can I just add, I'd like to just add one more thing
Yeah, Peter.
in my acknowledgements. At the top of that list also is Tanya for coordinating 25 or 30 or however many it was tours that we did out there, press releases, just all kinds of, you know, she's working on volunteer events looking into the fall. So yes, sorry for forgetting that, but couldn't have done it without her.
I'll pass it along this afternoon, Peter. I see Amanda is here. Amanda, you didn't get to say anything during the stewardship report. Anything you'd like to say? Hi.
Hi, everyone. Well, it's hard to follow Peter because he's doing so much, but we are making progress here on Lopez too, hearing back from our CO about the status of the grant and the cultural resource consultation. So we have initiated some getting an archaeological monitoring plan specifically for our project, and which would cover the removal of the sport court and the rebuilding of the stairs to the beach. Erin Helcom and I have been reviewing comments on the draft plan that went out to staff, and so we'll be circling back to the commission with the plan to review for the Watmao Bay Preserve management plan. So look in your emails for that next week.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had a great work party out at Watmao beginning of August, and built a stacked rail fence, and it was just a really fun day out there.
And Amanda, you have some more tours scheduled into the fall, don't you?
Yeah, I have a tour next week, and it's kind of an evening tour, so I've had some interest in that. And then we also have tours in September. I will also add down at Watmao Bay, I've been assisting the Bureau of Land Management with a with a visitor satisfaction survey. So that entails just spending time at the trailhead and talking to people as they're leaving. It's a pretty standardized survey for all BLM sites. So I would say not all the questions are applicable to Watmao, but they need a certain number of respondents in order to get their statistical analysis completed. And that really supports their management plan for the area. So it's, I would say, important to us that they succeed in their survey effort. So it's also been really fun to kind of be down there. I've just been able to talk to a lot of people, and everyone just loves how beautiful it is. That's what I hear over and over again.
Great.
Yeah, Peggy.
Peggy.
Is there any effort to kind of let more people know about that survey? I was out there, so I did take it. But I think a lot of people, Lopetians, don't go to Watmao this time of year because it's too crowded. And it'd be really great to get the word out about the survey, because I think a lot of people would like to reply.
Yeah, so the goal is to get different, days and times, but to do it during peak visitation period. And I think it's supposed to be randomized, so sending people down there just to take the survey probably isn't what they're going for. But I have encountered quite a few Lopesians down there, even in just the few days that I was there, so.
And also, is there any ongoing conversation with the Historical Society about the house out at Watmaya?
So I have not spoken to them recently, but we did look at some grant opportunities together and talk to a volunteer historic preservation group about it. But the management plan really just leaves it open to continue working on that project. It doesn't set a firm path. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. We will look forward to the draft management plan.
Great, thank you.
And what's your trajectory for that? When would you like to the commission to consider approval of that plan?
Well, this is so everyone, you'll have a chance to comment to Aaron and I on the draft plan, and then it will need to go to public comment. And we usually do that for 30 days. So I think maybe we could do a check-in in September about what kind of public comments we've received. But it probably won't be finalized till October.
Good. Okay, let's put that on our next September agenda. We'll do a check-in and then we'll know more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right. That brings us to future agenda items, and you just got one.
I was gonna comment, Bree with BLM was working the fair and said she was really grateful to you, Amanda, for supporting those surveys.
Okay.
What now?
Anybody else future agenda items?
Well, hunting. How are we gonna deal with hunting out there?
Right
As
up.
we get into fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you. Amanda. I mean, I do feel, in the very least, we need signage out there that identifies where boundaries are. So there's a little bit more clarification about where people can hunt and where they can't.
So when you say hunting, it's specifically, you mean the South Lopez?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we had the
Broader.
accident last year.
Yeah.
So in terms of the agenda, can we have a progress report on that on the September agenda?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll just.
Go ahead.
What, I'm sorry, Doug,
Hunting opens ahead of that. It starts in the
But-
first week of September.
but Peggy has been asking for it, so season open or not, I think we should take a look.
Amanda had something.
Yeah, I'll just add, so hunting at Lopez Hill opens September 1st and goes through the end of October. So we just do that first opening. And we have signs that we post on the various access points to Lopez Hill, and we put out vests so that people are aware when they show up that it's hunting season. And hunters need to contact the land bank to get written permission. So we've in the past have had a good interaction with them before they're going out. And in terms of South Lopez, so we don't allow hunting at our properties in Watmau, and I can post no hunting signs on our property lines and where they intersect the trail with BLM. But those lands are managed by BLM, so they need to post their information too.
Right. I agree. It is complex, and the boundaries are complex, so people don't really know. But that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, signage. Okay, I have two items that I think we need to carry over because we didn't do them. The first is I was looking forward to a discussion from Tanya and the communications committee on sorting out the the land bank communications plan from the county plan, as I mentioned before. So I'd like to put that on the next agenda. The other item is the discussion that we started last month about reserves for future stewardship funds. And I don't know, what's your feeling, commissioners? Do you want to? There was a lot of interest last month in fact, all of the financial discussion. And to that point, do you want to bring that up again, continue that discussion?
Sure.
I see one head nod.
Tim looks.
I'm thinking, it would be good to have a preliminary discussion, however, the results of November will determine a huge amount.
Right.
Also, they could change things entirely, so I don't foresee necessarily deciding a lot before then.
Yeah, it might be a good December item.
Well, I think part of that discussion was intended to try to answer some concerns that were brought up. And I'm talking about the concerns that Joe Cohen brought to our meeting a couple of months ago, for that we have adequate reserves. And I will say again, what I said at the last meeting, which is that from everything I know, I think we're doing fine. The issue is that we need to find a way to tell the public, to communicate that to the public. That's my point of view, but, and, you know, you all might have some other points of view on that, but you seem to want to continue that discussion.
That is a very good point, that the public needs to know about this and be reassured.
Sure, and I think it's important to realize that there may be an audience that is responding to the stewardship issue. And recently at an event that you and I both attended for the Friends, I heard at least one of those parties explain to somebody that we only needed money for 12 years. And then we would be okay. And my personal preference is I would like to be underground and still, or out in the air and still know that the San Juan County Land Bank is out there and my kids and grandkids and their kids and grandkids are running and playing and breathing the air here. So I don't see this as a 12-year project. And I just want to make sure that we don't allow other information to kind of take over our stewardship discussion, because those are two different tracks.
Right.
And every organization needs to be concerned about what they own and how they care for it. And I certainly think that the deferred discussion we had today was very good. And I think we should have those at every conversation, especially as we're going in to the end of fiscal years. But, you know, I can entertain more on stewardship if that's what people feel like they need to do. I don't want to be pigeonholed into a conversation that looks like we're talking about the land bank only needing to exist for a certain period of time.
So I'm not really sure whether this is
right,
in fact, a financial discussion or a communications discussion about finance. But I think that we need to continue that discussion next time.
Sure.
Okay? Anything else? Then it is 11:05 and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.